Many of you are familiar with Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather movie trilogy. The movies are based on real criminal organizations, specifically 5 Italian criminal networks that were called families. They included the Gambino family, the Bonanno family, the Genovese family, the Lucchese family, and the Colombo family. These organized crime families are commonly referred to as either the Mafia or sometimes as the mob. They're also referred to as La Cosa Nostra, which means our thing. The American Mafia is an offshoot of the Sicilian Mafia. The predecessor to this mafia was known as the Black Hand. By 1869, Sicilian criminals had infested the city of New Orleans. These criminals included notorious murderers, thieves, and counterfeiters who formed a criminal society who operated for mutual gain. Later, waves of Sicilian and other Italian immigrants settled in New York, and the Mafia began to grow in power among the poor Italian ghettos in East Harlem, the Lower East Side, and in Brooklyn. Over time, these criminal gangs developed into the 5 distinct Mafia families. These 5 families engaged in all kinds of criminal activity, including human trafficking, racketeering, drug trafficking, extortion, murder, robbery, smuggling, arms trafficking, gambling, fencing, prostitution, pornography, money laundering, bank and securities fraud, and many other financial crimes. The Mafia all use the same basic structure. Let's start at the bottom and move up to the top. First, you have the associates. These are low-level thugs, gang members, drug dealers, and other street criminals who give a share of the money they make in their own enterprises to their supervisors. Associates belong to specific crews, though they are not official members of the crime family yet. They're given protection by their supervisors, known as soldiers. Soldiers are the next level in the organization. These soldiers are also known as made men. To become a made man, soldiers must take a blood oath, including a vow of silence. In some of the families, an associate is required to commit murder before becoming a made man. The soldiers are organized and directed by a system of crime family captains known as capos. Third from the top in the crime family is a trusted advisor to the mob boss known as the consigliere. Second in line is the underboss, often a son or other family member of the boss who is groomed to take over the family business in the future. And at the very top of the organization is the undisputed leader of the family known as the boss or don. If the boss is indisposed for one reason or another, an underboss may serve temporarily in his stead. Out of the 5 Italian Mafia families, the youngest and most violent of them was the Colombo family. At one time, the Colombo underboss, the second in command, was an Italian man named John Sonny Franzese. Sonny Franzese was born in Naples, Italy in 1917 and served for over 60 years as the underboss of the Colombo crime family. Franzese was vicious. He escaped murder charges partly because he was good at hiding the bodies. Eventually, he was caught on tape explaining his disposal techniques, which sometimes included dismembering people in kiddie pools, cooking body parts in microwaves, stuffing those parts down garbage disposals, and other techniques that only Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman could admire. In 1974, he killed a Colombo soldier who he believed was getting too close to Sonny's wife. The soldier's body was eventually discovered, buried under a basement floor. Not only did the corpse have a garrote wrapped around its neck, but the soldier's testicles had been cut off and stuffed into the man's mouth. Sonny Franzese did much of his work through his own son, Michael. Michael was born in 1951. He started at the bottom of the ladder as an associate and was inducted as a soldier, taking his blood oath on Halloween night in 1975. Within 5 years, Michael Franzese had been elevated to the position of capo and controlled his own crew of up to 500 associates. The character of Franzese was depicted by the actor Joseph Bono in Martin Scorsese's 1990 mobster film Goodfellas. If you've ever seen the Johnny Depp movie, then you're familiar with the undercover FBI agent Joe Pistone, who worked as an associate named Donnie Brasco, who infiltrated the Bonanno crime family. Franzese and Pistone were together a number of times in the street throughout the course of Pistone working with the Bonanno family. Because Michael's father, Sonny, was next in line to run the Colombo family, Michael was a very powerful capo. Life magazine called Michael Franzese, quote, the mob's young genius. NBC News labeled him the Prince of the Mafia. The FBI awarded him no such fancy title, but they did say that, quote, Franzese is one of the biggest money earners in the history of organized crime. Michael found many ways to make significant money for the Colombo crime family, from producing pornography, including the famous Deep Throat movie, to investing in a major record label that backed well-known recording artists, including Gladys Knight and the Pips. But there was one scheme in particular that raked in billions of dollars for the crime family, a gasoline tax scam. The scam made Michael the biggest mob moneymaker since Al Capone. But that scam was only possible because of Michael Franzese's partnering with the Jewish mafia from Russia. Some Jewish mafia figures from Russia settled in Canada. For example, the close friend of the Rothschild family, Samuel Bronfman, the notorious drug, alcohol, and human trafficking mob boss whose own granddaughters, Sarah and Claire Bronfman, helped to run the infamous NXIVM sex cult. During the 1970s and 80s, at the height of the United States' Cold War with the Soviet Union, U.S. immigration policy was crafted to allow mass immigration of Soviet Jews into the United States. This flood of Soviet Jews settled mostly in Brighton Beach, an area in Brooklyn, New York, that came to be known as Little Odessa. And just as Italian immigration brought organized crime into America from Italy, the mass immigration of Soviet Jews from the Soviet Union brought in organized crime from Russia, Ukraine, and other Soviet republics. But collectively, these criminal operations are just referred to as the Russian Mafia. There have been many notable Jewish Russian mobsters, including Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Siegel, nicknamed Bugsy, and played by actor Warren Beatty in a movie by the same name. Because the Russian Mafia is so central to this story, we will take a moment to examine how these Jewish gangsters first came to America. The Russian Mafia was very powerful in the Soviet Union, so much so that the Soviet government used the Russian Mafia as a de facto intelligence agency. The Russian Mafia was closely associated with a Hasidic sect of Judaism known as Chabad Lubavitch. Chabad, which is a Hebrew acronym for the words wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and Lubavitch being the Yiddish name of a town in Russia where the movement's leaders lived. According to Lanta.ru, a Russian banking website, of Russia's 200 billionaires, 25% of them are Jewish, with a combined net worth of approximately $133 billion. Whether we speak of Jewish oligarchs from Russia, Ukraine, or other parts of the former Soviet Union, most of them are connected to Chabad Lubavitch. According to Natan Shransky, the former chairman of a Jewish advocacy group called the Jewish Agency, this religious sect was used to connect Jews throughout the Soviet Union during the Cold War. While devotees of Chabad Lubavitch consider themselves to be Orthodox Jews, the leader of the Jewish Orthodox in Israel, Rabbi Eliezer Shach, has stated that Chabad Lubavitch are actually heretics. Lubavitch stems from an earlier offshoot Jewish movement known as Sabbatianism. According to both Jewish and non-Jewish sources, back in the 1600s, a historical figure named Sabbati or Shabbat Zevi proclaimed that he was the promised Messiah. The word Messiah comes from the Hebrew Meshiach, which means anointed one or king. Adherents of the Jewish religion believe that one day a king will rise up to rule the Jewish people during a period called the Messianic Age. When Shabbat Zevi proclaimed himself to be the long-awaited Messiah, some knew that he was actually a false Messiah, but many Jews did believe him anyway. In fact, according to Jewish scholars, nearly half of the Jews throughout the entire world came to accept Zevi's claims of messiahship. In retrospect, Zevi may very well have suffered from severe manic depression based upon his own writings. He described receiving the incredible illumination from God for a period of time, followed by a period of a fall in which the heavens seemed closed to him. During his periods of illumination, Zevi engaged in bizarre rituals, including sexual acts that were considered sinful by the standards of both Judaism and Christianity. And Zevi encouraged his followers to do the same. These followers were known as Shabbatians or Sabbatians, and they were not few in number. After Zevi's death, a radical group of those followers continued to keep Zevi's unorthodox teachings alive, up until 1756, when a Polish Jew named Jacob Frank proclaimed himself to be the reincarnation of Shabbat Zevi. Jacob Frank taught a new doctrine of personal purification through transgression, meaning that if a person wanted to transcend normal human experience and become like God, he must commit unspeakable acts of sin. Often, those acts of sin involved sexual brutality toward others, especially toward children. And Frank set the example for his followers by repeatedly violating his own daughter. A new kind of Jewish mysticism arose from this commingling of the teachings of Shabbat Zevi and Jacob Frank. Then in the mid-1770s, secret societies such as the Freemasons became a growing influence. In the Bavarian region of Germany, a Jesuit-trained professor named Adam Weishaupt considered joining the Freemason order to try to use it for his own purposes. Ultimately, he decided instead to formally organize his own secret order based partially on Freemasonry. Weishaupt called his group the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati. And this secret Illuminati order adopted many of the beliefs, the practices, and the rituals of Shabbat Zevi, Jacob Frank, and other Jewish mystics. These various mystics were called the Illuminated Ones. Over time, this secret order of the Illuminati grew in both membership, influence, and power. The reality and existence of the Illuminati order is acknowledged by mainstream historians as a matter of historical fact. Adam Weishaupt infiltrated the Freemasons and other secret societies while simultaneously starting his own quasi-Masonic organization that has grown more powerful over the centuries. The Illuminati created an elaborate network of spies and counter-spies. A major strategy to maintain secrecy was to keep all information fragmented between different cells, each only receiving just as much information as they needed for their roles. Thus, the few at the top of the order maintained power and control over the rest of the order. Through this secretive network, the leaders of the Illuminati order were able to cause significant political havoc. The order is frequently credited with the instigation of the French Revolution. Chabad Lubavitch, which has its roots in Sabbatianism, was formed during this time period, specifically in 1775. It is not a coincidence that the Russian mafia has incorporated these quasi-Masonic blood oaths similar to those of Sabbatian-based secret societies. It is these secret oaths that help to protect the criminals within the mafia itself. Author Robert Friedman wrote, quote, "Italian organized crime in America is a pimple on the horse's butt compared with Russian organized crime in America and globally." He says the reason for the Russian mafia's greater power is that they, quote, "have something no other crime group in the world has. They have their own state to work from. In fact, a former superpower." The Russian mafia has tens of thousands of mobsters operating today in more than 50 countries. According to the FBI, the current leader of the global Russian mafia syndicate is a Russian Jew named Semyon Mogilevich. Mogilevich was born in Ukraine and is nicknamed the Boss of Bosses. He holds both Russian and Israeli citizenship. The FBI has labeled Mogilevich, quote, "the most dangerous mobster in the world." They say that he is connected to international drug and weapons trafficking, to prostitution, to contract murder, and extortion. The Russian energy company that plays a key role in the Russia-Ukraine gas disputes is named Ros-Ukrenergo and is controlled by Mogilevich. It has been alleged that Mogilevich has maintained a positive relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin since the 1990s. Today, Mogilevich lives freely in Moscow. A key Jewish member of Mogilevich's crime syndicate in the United States helped to weave the Russian mafia together with the Italian mafia in New York. That man's name was David Bogatin. Bogatin had two Jewish accomplices, Lev Persitz and Michael Markowitz. These men were big-time mobsters. According to the New York Times, Markowitz met his death in 1989. The article reads, quote, "A businessman who admitted participating in a $100 million gasoline tax evasion scheme and having ties to mobsters was shot to death as he drove his Rolls-Royce in Brooklyn early yesterday," the police said. After his car smashed into two parked ones in the Mill Basin section, the businessman, Michael Markowitz, staggered out and collapsed, Detective James J. Coleman said. Mr. Markowitz, who would have turned 43 years old on Saturday, was pronounced dead at Kings County Hospital. It was this gas tax evasion scheme that originally brought Bogatin, Persitz, and Markowitz into business with the Colombo strongman Michael Franzese. In 1980, Franzese was involved with a lucrative gas tax scheme with a different mobster, an Italian named Lawrence Salvatore Iorizzo. At that time in U.S. history, local, state, and federal gas taxes came out to about 27 cents for every dollar. It was the responsibility of the owners of gas stations to collect and report all gas tax revenue. Iorizzo had accumulated over 300 gas stations in New York and New Jersey. He collected the gas tax on fuel sales, but did not turn all of the tax revenue over to the government. He skimmed a large amount off the top. This scheme was made possible by placing the ownership of the gas stations under various shell companies that protected Iorizzo's anonymity. He registered dozens of these companies in Panama. When time grew close for the government to collect its taxes from the gas stations, Iorizzo would close the gas stations down, as if they had been abandoned, and would reopen them under a different shell company. This went on for 6 years before the operation was eventually shut down by the FBI. But in the meantime, Michael Franzese used his government connections to get new sales licenses each time for the new gas stations. He also provided the terrifying muscle to fend off other mobsters who tried to claim a slice of Iorizzo's tax scheme pie. And it is that muscle that brought the Russian mobsters into business with Franzese and the Colombo crime family. Bogatin and his associates were running their own version of the gas tax scheme, but they were having trouble making their underlings pay up. So in 1984, Bogatin and Franzese came to an agreement. The Colombo family would receive a 75% cut of all the money generated, and Bogatin's crew would keep 25%. In exchange for this revenue, the Colombo family would keep obtaining the licenses for the operations and would break the legs of anyone stupid enough to hold out when it came time to collect the payments. This is how the Jewish-Russian mafia began to merge business with the Italian mafia. The money from this operation went on to become one of the greatest frauds in U.S. history. At first, they made between $5 to $8 million per week in profit, then over $100 million per month, and eventually, the gas tax scheme was bringing in more than $1 billion per year in profits. Despite only keeping 25% of the total profits, Russian mafia gangster David Bogatin became a very rich man, and he went looking for ways to launder his money. So, in 1984, Bogatin walked into a high-rise condominium complex at 721 Fifth Avenue and sat down across from the owner of the building, a real estate tycoon named Donald J. Trump.